listeners, and welcome to The Flore, fantasy and lore from the ground up. My name's Eli.
I'm Joe Bondowski.
And I'm Aaron.
We do in-depth lore podcasts for games, movies, TV shows, and different worlds of mythology in our culture.
One of us does an in-depth research on our topic. One of us is familiar with the topic.
And one of us knows nothing. So the right questions will always be asked and will be addressed for anyone coming into the topic, regardless of how much you know.
Today I'm talking about Goblinoids. So I'm going to do a linear pattern of the Goblin history. Eberron doesn't have a specific creation like the gnomes had of why the goblins are here, but the earliest knowledge comes from the goblin oral history, that they have some necromancy that they learned from the age of demons. So there's the first age of dragons, and then there's the age of demons after Kyber is encapsulated by Eberron creating the world. He released a bunch of demons.
Right.
And the goblins are present at this time, and they have necromancy that they lost. So they knew it.
The goblins born out of the blood of Kyber like the demons?
I couldn't find definitive evidence of their birth.
Okay.
So this is the earliest thing that we know, and it comes from the Goblinoid spoken history, because they don't have a written history anymore. It's an oral tradition, and that's popular amongst their society is the oral tradition. Their magic is bardic. And,
interesting.
And they don't touch any other magic. They are agnostic, so they don't have clerics, and they never got into wizardry. But necromancy is the only thing that it was like this was our non-bardic knowledge that they had. So
I think the bardic magic is really interesting because bardic is the only form of the arcane magic that has healing in it. So I guess they could still have healers in that sense because their magic is bardic. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so anyone who had the bardic magic in them was pretty immediately sent to a more elite caste within them. And at this time, there's only hobgoblins. It's only hobgoblins that exist.
So they were the first, the hobgoblins.
Yeah, the hobgoblins are the first. And they're humanoid, right? They're a little bit shorter. They're lean. Their limbs are a little bit longer. They have tusks. Usually black or brown hair that they keep up, back, and tied. They often have scarification tattoos. They practice piercings, and a lot of them would look painful and usually were painful, but they would always protect their nose. Their nose, they wouldn't scarify or pierce their nose at all. That was almost like a piece of pride.
So question here. What is the hob for in hobgoblin? Does it have any specific meaning or relation?
So I wasn't able to get into the why this is called a goblin, why there's a hobgoblin, why that's called a bugbear. Except for...
Well, I think bugbear is pretty self-manifested.
Right. Because they're covered in fur, they have talons and fangs, and
they're very bear-like.
Right. They're a goblin turned into a bear. Yeah. So the reasoning I see here is first there were goblins in the history of D&D world, like in the 80s, right when this first came out. They were like, we're gonna make goblins. And then they wanted to make the upgrade that became hobgoblin. And then they're like, all right, we're going to take it kind of in a different direction. And we want to make them a bear, and we'll make them a bugbear. And this inspired other ones like the owl bear and other ones, right? But this was like early on mythology that was getting created, which turned into Forgotten Realms. And a lot of the histories and mythology here is the same between Eberron and Forgotten Realms, but they have their own unique history here.
Yeah.
I think that comes from not an Eberron world, but just people were trying to create, and that's what they landed on, was They started at Goblin, and they're like, let's just add on to it a Hobgoblin, and then it turned into Bugbear, and that's what stuck. Right. And I think it's good that they kept that rather than trying to create a new hierarchical system there. The Age of Demons are 9 million years before current times. We're not sure exactly when goblins appear in there, but they do. And then comes the Age of Giants. And at this time, they're scattered clans, and the giants have an empire, and they are feeble against the giants. But during this time, the hobgoblins created goblins. The goblinoids are kind of highly mutagen. They live about as long as a human, but they have unique looks because they have lots of mutagens in their species. And so, and hobgoblins believed in slavery 100%. And so they made these goblins by breeding them purposefully.
Wait, so I guess they bred their hobgoblin slaves to create goblins?
Right.
What?
This is how goblins were created, was hobgoblins needed some slaves. And it was easier for them to take the slaves they had to create a smaller, but yet sneakier, but still loyal goblin. Right?
Interesting.
So this is how the goblins come about. It's the hobgoblins, big into slavery, decided to...
I guess my experience here with this is the Cult of Evil 6 in the Borderlands campaign.
Okay.
Where you encounter multiple groups of hobgoblins, but within their layers, there's little clusters of goblins hanging out as well. And now that makes sense. These are their slaves and servants.
Yes, that's right. And all the goblinoids are lawful. They're eager to fall in line. And there's even a curse from the Forgotten Realms that I think applies to these goblins as well. Is there's a curse of the Bagest. And this is an evil spirit that infests a goblin or a goblinoid. When it does, they have the ability to transform into like a were-goblin. It's much more powerful and fast, and has fangs and claws.
So in all my playing of various Dungeons and Dragons and modules, I have never encountered a were-goblin. Have you in your pen and paper?
I have not, but there's two popular curses amongst goblin that kind of affect, especially the goblins, and why that they are happy to fall in line with mundane, slave-like chores, and in fact shun away any kind of taking on of responsibilities or stepping up as a leader. And it's tied into this curse of the Balgest, because the Balgest, it wants to kill only goblins or goblinoids of rank or influence or power, like political, social foothold goblins, until it kills 14 of them.
So where does it come from? What's the origin of the curse?
So in Forgotten Realms, there was a god that the goblins had pissed off. And so he cursed them with this evil spirit that will jump from goblin to goblin.
Until it claims 14.
Until it claims 14 important goblins in goblin society. And then it is returned to that goblin that was infested. His body and spirit is then taken to the realm of the god that was angered, and is kind of treating like a really good dog, and gets to live on that plane with him for eternity.
Interesting.
And so the goblins shy away from power of positions and whatnot, because of the curse of the Balgest. Because they can't do anything about becoming a Balgest. In fact, if you did, they would be like, you fight for you. It's your power, you know. I mean, this is part of the curse. We're not blaming you yourself, but we don't want to be in positions of power because then you will straight up avoid us. And the Balgest will even infest a clan and become the leader of that clan and try to sneak into other clans or wage war against other clans. And usually this clan becomes extremely dark and evil when a Balgest takes control of the clan.
I think that also like the curse of the Balgast, its existence within their societies, very much speaks to the reason why they never really advance their civilizations, because there's so much avoidance of leadership roles and leaders organize the people, and without that, it's hard for a society to move forward, and so they're kind of locked because of that primitive fear and that curse.
Right. As well as, especially the hobgoblins are extremely paranoid. When their child is born, it's taken from the mother at about 3 weeks old. Uh-huh. And they are extremely crude and cold people. And their main thing that they hold is self-sufficiency. And the way they kind of grow their society is like, if I'm self-sufficient, I can hold this much territory. And if there's another hobgoblin next to me who's self-sufficient, he can hold this much territory. And it's just holding your standing. So the Goblinoids, they don't have like personal honor, but they're very big on their standing within their society. And that's how they try to hold it up. So the hobgoblins recognize that they are like the tacticians and the leaders and the slave owners. So they don't shy away from responsibility the same way goblins do. Goblins are like, nope, I'm going to avoid that. Like, don't give me something important to do. Give me something mundane and small to do. I'll take care of that.
So we're almost 20 episodes deep, or even deeper than that, depending on when you hear this commercial, into Flore. And so if you're still listening, then you've been around for a while. So I guess I have this question at this point. Why are you not a supporter on Patreon? If we are worth $1, then head over to the Patreon and put $1 in our jar. But if we're not, write us and tell us and let us know what we can do to be worth that $1. So if we're worth that $1, then head over and put that in our jar. We've been producing for a while, and we would love the support. That's at patreon.com/Flore, Flore, fantasy and lore. And if we're not worth $1, then email us. Flore, Flore, fantasyandlore@gmail.com. You can go to Flore on Facebook and leave us a message there.
Obviously, if you feel like $1 is not enough, you can give us more. We will not be upset by that. So feel free to, be like, oh gosh, they're worth $400 a month or whatever. Like, we are okay with you doing that, right? Right, Joe?
We are. So
surprisingly enough,
Joe, I really like your point of if we're not worth that $1, tell us why. I really like that as a stepping point there. I would love to hear people tell us why we're not worth that $1.
But what if they say mean things?
Aaron, they will say mean things. So anyways, with a unique feature of goblins to hobgoblins is goblins, one of the things they value the most is friendship. And I think this is their rebellion against the hobgoblins, because the hobgoblins teach you to not trust anyone around you. Like, they don't even put their guard down around each other.
Right. Because
they don't want to show weakness. To show weakness in front of their peers is a great shame.
Yeah. So the small goblins, they value the friendship, partly because they're enslaved by this culture, and to counter that culture, they have shaped theirs very differently. And not only that, but I mean, they're smaller, dealing with larger slave lords. I mean, they're kind of dependent on teamwork to overcome their captors.
That's right. And yeah, a goblin's about half size, small size, whereas a hobgoblin is medium size.
Right. Yeah.
So after the Age of Giants, when the goblins created, or the hobgoblins created goblins.
So that's during the Age of Giants.
Right. During their rule of the land, there's the elf and the Curie who rebel and end the Age of Giants, and then you enter into what they call the final age, the Age of Monsters, and this is when the Goblins Empire is created. I'm going to butcher this, but
define the Goblin Empire. What is that? I don't.
Okay.
I know about Flore, right, which is the empire of ogres and hags and goblins and all the kind of evil monsters you fight. I know about Flore, but I don't know about the Goblin Nation.
Okay, so I'm not sure exactly when that age is. I didn't look up that one. But this one, so it starts about 16,000 years ago from present time in Eberron. And all the tribes of goblins unified. And this is over, is it Kybor? Khyber, right. So they're all kind of from that area, and they all unite. They create the Goblin Empire, and it's called the Haakani.
Okay, so hang on, a little question here. So the Curse of the Balgast, it does not affect goblins, only hobgoblins.
Nope, all Goblinoids.
So how is it they get together to make this big nation?
There's one Bahaki, and it gets recycled through their society. And sometimes they'll even try to trap a Bahaki, and they'll just imprison it so that the evil spirit can't continue.
So that's how the Goblin Nation is formed. One of the goblins is like, hey, this is the great hindrance to our society. All we have to do is cage these people once we find them, and then it can't spread.
Right, and they'll even there's been rumors that they'll attempt to lure them into goblins on purpose because that it's that much smaller of a beast to deal with.
Right. Wow, that's really interesting. So that's how the Goblin Nation comes to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So tell me about the Goblin Nation.
This first forming, they take over land. No one else can compete with them. So, like, they push the elves back, the orcs back. They've completely overrun and populated the area. And hobgoblins, they're not so much farmers, but they were miners. They did form stable societies, but they were known for doing Viking-type tactics of, we're going to loot and plunder you. If we find farm tools, we're going to go ahead and take this back, turn it into an alloy, and make weapons out of it.
Okay.
So, closer to a Genghis Khan kind of rule. And as well as, they're big into slavery, and one of the wars that happened here, so they enslaved the gnomes, which they call jungle rats.
Why jungle? Where does that come from?
Because these are the forest gnomes.
Oh,
right?
Okay, yeah.
Right. And during this first 5,000 years, or 4,000 years, this is when they create the bugbear, using the same tactics that they used creating goblins. Was they just bred mutated slaves.
So what was the purpose of the bugbear, right? Like, we know why they made the goblins. They wanted a slave that was easier to control and manipulate. What's the point of the bugbear?
So the bugbear, they wanted like a shock troop. They wanted a big old beast in their battles with them, and they bred for dim-wittedness, right? So they wanted them dumb, but they wanted them big and strong. And it was to have another tactical goblinoid troop on the battlefield. The hobgoblins are very tactical minded in combat. You should expect that they're going to use advanced combat tactics when up against them, right? Goblins might try to be sneaky and whatnot, but they might do something foolish. A bugbear's probably just going to try to use brute force. The hobgoblin's going to be the tactician in the back, trying to coordinate difficult tasks in order to accomplish, a winnable goal. It's not exactly clear if they took goblins who were more mutagenic than the hobgoblins, if they took them and mutated them, or if they took just more hobgoblins that had been enslaved and bred them.
Again, they all root in hobgoblins, and that's the strain that's mutated to create the others. Okay.
Exactly. And the bugbears, once again, self-sufficiency is extremely important to them, but they were a little bit more value power, but they also understood the power of a society, especially being born inside of, the greatest empire at the time, that they saw the benefits of a running society, and so they would fall in line as well. Rather than just giving up to the brute strength feralness that you would see in more tribal kind of clans. So they have 4,000 years of rule. They've enslaved the gnomes.
That's a really long time for their society to rule. What's the lifespan on a hobgoblin, goblin, bugbear?
About 60 years.
Oh, so very much. I mean, even a little shorter than a human. Yeah, interesting.
Well, and it's only shorter because of a human because they're so warlike. They think if they're not in battle and conquering, that it weakens them. And so this is a giant conquest that they're doing during this empire.
Okay.
I mean, they are setting up mines and whatnot, but
I guess what is it that keeps them from being conquered? Because I mean, in all my histories and everything, a powerful.
So the humans aren't around.
Okay.
The giants were put down
by the dragons.
Before that, the demons got locked up by the Quetzalcoatl. It's like a feathered serpent.
So the dragons and the Quetzalcoatl, yes.
So first there's demons everywhere, right? Yeah. And they rule the world. And the goblins are running around like little rats. And then the demons get put down, right? And then the age of giants come. Hobgoblins got nothing on giants.
Right.
Right? Then they get put down.
So I'm saying by the dragons, who are you saying put down the giants? Because I know of the great war between the dragons and the giants, which ends the rule of the giants, as far as if my history is correct, right?
No,
and the dragons established their society on Argonesi.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure you're right there, and I was misspeaking.
Okay, so it's the dragons who put down the giants in the Great War between the dragons and giants, and then they lay out the draconic prophecy, and then it sounds like this is then when the goblins rise. Right? This is where we are in the time period?
So, the rise of the goblins happened after the Age of Giants and during the Age of Monsters. And this is at 16,000 years ago.
All right, that's going to be it for our episode on the Goblinoids Part 1. This original episode was really long, so we, as we've gone through and edited it, we've cut it into 2 parts. So Eli will continue the story and the culture of the Goblinoids in Part 2 of this series. Originally, this was set up as just an Eberron piece, but we did a very small section on Goblinoids, talking about the adventures in the Dark Alliance, and we got a few requests for a little bit more in-depth info on them, and so we dug up this piece that we'd recorded a long time ago. I think I cut it out from the recording, but this is actually Eli's first time on the podcast right here. This is he did a great job here, and we're going to release this out to everybody, and then there will be a part 2 where he finishes his story. As always, thanks for listening. We would love if you'd like, share, leave a review, or head on over to the Patreon. In it, I referenced Dolur. For those of you who are really familiar with Eberron, Droam was actually the nation I was thinking of. Dolur is a different thing in Eberron. So I did make that mistake before we get too many emails on that part. And then, of course, if you do want to write in with questions or anything you want us to go deeper on, you can do that at flore.fantasy and lore flore@gmail.com, or you can go to the Flore on Facebook, the group there, Fantasy and Lore. And then if you enjoy the show, we would love if you'd put $1 in our jar. Just head on over to the Patreon. And thanks for listening.